I'd like to invite Rachel Williams, Maurice, Natalie, and Joy to the stage. Okay, it's okay to clap. It's okay to clap.
Is my mic working? Oh, my mic is working. Welcome, everyone. You have survived 2 full days of tech inclusion. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yay! I know you have been soaking up a lot of information and learning a lot and going to take it back to your companies. I am excited about this panel of new leaders. So I'm Rachel Williams. I head up diversity and inclusion at Yelp. I consider myself a vet. Been doing this for the last 3 years. But I've been in recruiting in tech for about 20. So I've seen a lot. Remember when Google was a startup, Yahoo was a startup, all that good stuff. And I think it's important for our industry and for diversity and inclusion to bring up people to do this work with fresh perspectives. That being this crew sitting next to me. So these are the next D&I leaders you guys are looking at, and we're going to hear from them today. So I want each of them to kind of just talk about who they are, how they got to where they are, so you guys can learn a little bit about their career paths. Because I think traditionally, like me, everyone came up through HR or recruiting, and now we're all doing this diversity and inclusion work. But I think it's interesting and good for diversity if we actually get folks from different areas, from different disciplines, from different backgrounds and different ways of thinking. So who wants to start?
I'll go for
Take it, Natalie, take it.
I'll start. I'm Natalie Bonifede. I lead diversity and inclusion at Pivotal. I have worked for the past 10 years in the nonprofit sector, actually. I started in international development, studied sociology, thought that I wanted to go that route, got pretty frustrated by the lack of utilizing tech for social impact, and then got very interested in tech and impact work. Came to San Francisco and then worked on the nonprofit side of things at Girls Who Code, nice. And then slowly worked my way at Pivotal. So not the recruiting route, but.
Yeah, I like it. Different. Joy
Yeah,
Hightower.
Sure. As I was telling you earlier, I don't think that we should use the language of traditional path to tech. There's no such thing as that anymore, because I'm going to tell you this, if that's the case, the needle would have moved. So I don't think recruiters and hiring managers, I do apologize if you're in the audience, I'm not coming for you, but I don't think that they necessarily get that yet. So for myself, by training, I'm a social scientist, which means that I've studied and taught various isms that this industry is trying to better understand and create opportunities for people of different backgrounds. So for me, what I didn't realize is that I was actually doing that work for the past 7+ years, be it within my department, be it with research, be it at the university level, but certainly not in the corporate space. But the reality is that the opportunities don't look that different.
All right, where are you now?
Pardon?
Where are you now?
Oh, I'm at Genentech now.
Awesome.
Cool.
Maurice.
Yeah, so I'm Maurice Wilkins. I lead diversity and inclusion at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. I guess my perspective is also not the traditional one either. So before entering tech, I was in education. I ran programs for young people committed to the juvenile justice system, specifically black and brown boys. So doing that type of work, you're constantly bombarded with the reality that the people that look like you are oftentimes going to end up back in situations that are not the nicest. Left there, went to DC Public Schools, ran community engagement there for a little while, and then had a cool opportunity just by, I guess, my network of people that I know to go into sales at a startup. And so I worked at a small startup called Zemi, did that for a little while, ended up making another transition into a startup that focuses on helping people get through the job search and interview process. And so I hadn't had a diversity and inclusion role at all before that. But part of how I got into this is because I was tired of being in spaces where I felt like I was the only black or brown person. So I literally started building community. So I started hosting barbecues, dinners, panel discussions, and then literally that was my entryway into tech. And now I am facilitating a lot of the same things that I did on my own time with my own money in a space where I can actually create a much larger change.
Awesome. I never got an invite to the barbecue, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, I've invited you to a few of those things, you know.
I like barbecue.
Hey, next time.
So I have read that millennials are seeking companies that that are mission-driven, socially driven. They seek out diversity. I'm not going to make any assumptions, but I'm a Gen Xer, so and I'm going to maybe think someone on this panel might be a millennial, maybe, or Gen Z. How are you guys thinking about your approach to diversity and inclusion that you think is different than old folks like myself?
I'll take a stab at it. By virtue of being an academic before a corporate professional, I take a data-driven approach. But that's not to say that corporations haven't taken a data-driven approach, but it's just been a diversity as numbers approach. So for me, what I like to do is look at the data, look at a particular metric, excuse me, and do a deep dive to understand the how and the why, right? So the data can be so nuanced rather than just reporting out statistics or even just saying, there's X amount of people who have been hired in this role. But if you really actually want to build more robust leadership and development programs that are supposed to keep people in the organization, then you kind of need that more, they call it maybe soft data adjunct in tech, but the people data to understand that. So there's definitely the data-driven approach. The other thing that I will say is leveraging what we already know. So a lot of what's being talked about, like you can go do a simple query and it's been researched. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, why not use insights from what has worked or what hasn't worked, right? And it's going to look different at this particular historical moment. So for me, I'm always advocating for like, look at this HBR article or look at this organizational theory article, like it says X, Y, and Z. And I do have support from people analytics, but not necessarily on the D&I team. So it's trying to bring in academic research that informs what I think we should be doing or how we're approaching things, but using business speak to do it so that people don't think that you're trying to speak over their head or, you know, introduce something that's super esoteric.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I think on my end, I think all of it has to be driven by data, so that's a big piece of it. But I'm really of the assumption that you can look to a lot of non-traditional spaces to see models for D&I. So I grew up in a household that brought together diverse communities all the time. So I'm using the elements that I saw in spaces that I grew up in and infusing that into the culture of the spaces that I go into. So one of the things that's super important to me is community. And so in that community, there's usually food, there's music, there is some sense of things that make me feel happy. So in every space that I exist in, especially now, I'm going to figure out how do I facilitate that type of experience for people. And I think that when you do that, that's when you see people wanting to stay, wanting to be there. But more importantly, you find that, hey, maybe this isn't just a pipeline problem. It's a problem that we can address by ensuring that people feel like this is a space that they want to be a part of. And so making sure people feel like that is at the forefront of the work that you do, I think will change a lot of how we see it. And I think a lot of companies have gotten it wrong because they're like, oh yeah, let me just throw a whole bunch of money at it. Let me host these events, but they feel like I'm networking. And I don't ever want to do that. So I stay away from that. So making sure that's not at the forefront of it. So that's how I look at it.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll second the idea of looping D&I into just practices that you're already doing, whether it be social or business, and that's something that we do at Pivotal a lot. We're a very agile company, so we take a very decentralized and very iterative approach. So I do stuff at my job, obviously, but it's a very, again, decentralized approach. So I find employees doing amazing things around D&I all the time that I'm still learning about. So I'm trying to figure out how to equip them to do the things that they know that their teams need via what you said before, which is these like research-based articles that exist out there that like a very easy Google search can get you. So I'm taking the approach of you use Google for everything else in your life. Like, why don't you just, like, why can't we explore this in this area, right? Like, your job as an engineer, as a technical person, is to solve problems. Like, this is what we do. Let's use that approach for D&I.
Big question, but do you guys think the next few generations are going to solve this? Come on, let's leave the people with some hope.
When you say solve this,
come up with something, whether it's a platform, whether it's a way of thinking, whether it's a process, something that is going to move this forward. As mentioned before, this conversation has been happening in tech for maybe 30 years, maybe a little bit more. We're still talking about it, so can we fast track it? Who wants to be here in 2060? Still talking about it. Somebody?
So here's the thing on that. It could have been solved, thus I think it can be solved. But speaking to your point about millennials versus non-millennials, I'll just say it, some of the non-millennials need to move out the way.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, they need to move out the way. And what I mean by that, some, I didn't say all.
Okay.
What I mean
Hopefully
by
I'm
that,
on a short list.
No, you made it.
Okay.
You made it. But what I mean by that, and sometimes we have to be this direct so you can hear me. What I mean by that is that I don't know if you all have experienced this in your day-to-day, but millennials are at the forefront of changing the definitions of how we even talk about diversity and inclusion.
It's true.
But what I've encountered at a place like Genentech, where you've had people there 10, 15, 20 years doing this work, there's pushback on definitions, whether it's using initiative rather than project. There's pushback on how you're going to use the data. There's pushback on if you can talk to leaders. We have to somehow approach these corporate processes in a way that allow us to continue to innovate, because what it's actually doing is stifling us. And so it can be solved if people are, for example, if someone is the director or the VP of something, more often than not, at least at Genentech, they're a non-millennial. And so that means that they've been socialized and acculturated with these set of values and know-how that is really antithetical to how I would approach anything. Right? So that's what I mean when I say that.
Move out the way.
Basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically.
Got it. No offense taken.
Yeah, I think that goes back to, I think, a broader point. Is I think that it takes a perspective that is not like the old. I mean, a lot of times we're replicating models that have failed often. Like, we can look at some of the older companies that have been around since the 80s. Their numbers look just as bad as the Googles of the world. So I think that in order to move forward, there needs to be a new wave, an infusion of ideas. If you look at the amount of money that we spent, a couple billion or $1 trillion on D&I over the last few years, it still hasn't done much. So I mean, I think that for me, I'm in a unique position because I'm at a philanthropy and a tech company at the same time. And I think that we are in a unique place to capture what's actually working and what's failing. And we're actually going to make sure that we're telling people the story. We're building a narrative. But before we build a narrative, hey, let's figure out what are the things that are working well, and then being able to capture that so that others can replicate it. I would like to believe that we will become the leader in the space, but part of that is getting in the right spaces to actually know what people want, knowing what type of community that you should be building, knowing what are the trainings that need to go in to make sure that people can get through the door. Because the bigger piece of this, and this is my philosophy around it, is that the reason why we haven't moved the needle is because no one is actually investing in the training and development that's needed to get through the interview process. And so if I have never learned what are the things that I need to do, so that I need to be committing to a GitHub every single day, that I need to be working on scum projects or XYZ, if I don't know what those things are, but I'm throwing $1 billion at everything to get people through the pipeline, none of them, you're just firing, you're just not letting more people through the process, and you're just making it worse. So figuring out a way to advance the process on how to train people, how to provide access, I think is kind of where we are. And honestly, we want to be able to lead the way for that. And so we hopefully will partner with other organizations to kind of make that happen.
Love that.
Yeah, again, second what he said. But I think we're not going to move forward until our institutions move forward, and they move really slowly. And I think we're seeing some tech companies go further into that like space of like, okay, if our schools are failing us, we are going to take on the role of training and education.
Yeah, get involved early.
So I think that we're seeing a little bit of that, but I think it has to go further.
Yeah, apprenticeships are really big now, but making sure that we're actually doing that work right, and ensuring that it's not just the same people who are getting access to those opportunities, and then beyond that, ensuring that once people get into the pipeline and are in these companies, that we're actually converting them to full time. That's literally the only way that we're going to be able to move the needle on that front, at least under my.
Nice. Well, I'm hopeful. After all that, looks like things are gonna. I'll move out the way after this panel, so you guys can do all that work.
We need you. We're following the Yelp model,
What's something that you're excited about? One of the things like that I've been looking into is, as we just heard, the virtual reality, and that helping to drive empathy, which I think is kind of the foundation of changing hearts and minds around diversity and inclusion and belonging. Anything else out there that you guys think is pretty interesting that you heard about, want to explore maybe in your new roles?
I'm very excited about the apprenticeship trend personally.
Yeah,
so we're going to be piloting that in 2018. I've seen some people do some really good work. Liz Lowe at Adobe, I don't know if y'all know her. She's doing some really great work around that. So we're gonna be piloting that at.
Yeah, it would be great if apprenticeships became as normal as internships.
Yeah,
right?
I think on the flip side of that, I worry that once we get these people in the door, if we haven't already created a culture by which they're going to want to stay in the door, we're kind of, right, we have a problem, but that's something I'm personally excited about.
Cool, I like that.
Sure. What am I? I'm excited about a lot of stuff, but I'm excited about the opportunity to literally create a new path for the work that we're doing. I think apprenticeships is part of what CZI will make an investment in. Beyond that, I think that we're going to really think creatively about how we do tech ecosystem building. I also think it's a piece that no one is really touching. There are a lot of people in a lot of cities, specifically looking at Miami with Code Fever and Tech Square Labs in Atlanta. Like, there are people who are doing the hard work. And so I want to figure out how we amplify the voices of those places that are already working directly with the people that we're targeting and invest in the work that they're doing and figure out how we replicate that, bringing them all out here to hear the things that they're doing to actually make it work and then amplify it. So I'm really excited about the unique position that we have to be an amplifier for people who are actually doing the work. And then once we do that amplification, I want to take some of that and make sure that they are actually at CZI, because we're a full tech company in addition to a philanthropy. And so that's my biased plug. So,
For me, I'm excited about being at the fore of people innovation, the prospect of us maybe 10, 15 years from now not calling it D&I, but maybe it's like when I hear apprenticeship, I hear opportunity, I hear inclusion without us having to say D&I.
Right.
So again, still having the language evolve, and with the language evolving and consequently becoming more inclusive, what that means is that you have more worker bees across the organization doing the D&I work that won't be called D&I work anymore. So I'm excited to be a part of how that might look in the future.
Yeah, very cool. Super hopeful. So, since I'm talking to millennials, you guys did agree that you're millennials and Gen Zs. Okay. All right. So, social media is an interesting platform, if you will. Either amplifying, elevating the conversation around diversity and inclusion. What do you guys think about that? Its role in helping us move it forward. Me on the Gen X side, I'm not really here for it, but it's all right.
I think that struggling to figure out how to respond. It doesn't seem like there's no playbook for it, right? But I think it puts a lot of pressure on CEOs to respond to crises or scandals that are happening in the media. I know that personally we have struggled to figure out like what our place is in the conversation around other companies and what's going on. So I see a lot of companies struggle with that.
Yeah. You staying away from that one, Mark?
No, I think that it's our role to be where the people that we're targeting are. So social media is one of those spaces. I think that social media has done pretty good for providing a space and opportunity for people to express themselves. So I think we definitely should be figuring out how to navigate that. But I think that there's like a fine line between allowing for social media to dictate everything that happens in life. So I'm about figuring out how we can merge or find an intersection between like social media and like real life experiences for the people that we're targeting. And beyond that, I think that as we move into a space where social media has become like a space to also scrutinize the things that are happening in the world, I am interested in figuring out how do we move beyond just that. Everyone becomes like an activist or whatever you want to call it on social media, but it never translates beyond that. So like, what are the conversations that need to be had outside of that? How do you then use that to further like amplify the work that people are doing? And I think that we at CZI have a responsibility to do that because we target and we go after organizations and people who are actually doing the difficult work. So we have a platform to be able to kind of share and make sure that work is on a platform. I mean, it's on a space that multiple people will get to see. So I think it plays a vital role in D&I moving forward. And D&I from a perspective that's not the traditional just like black and white or like women versus men type of thing.
Yeah, you just made the argument, changed my mind. Joy, what do you think?
I'm going to answer the question a bit differently. So not thinking about social media on the outside, the Twitters and the Facebook, but I'm sure if you're at a company, there's some internal messaging system that could be considered to be a form of social media. And I bring that up is because more now than ever, employees expect for their CEO to respond than, let's say, in the 80s or 90s. There really wasn't an expectation there.
That's true.
So, for example, when something does happen outside of the workplace because the personal and the professional is more blurred than ever, employees are looking to their CEO to say something, whether it's internally or externally, depending on what it is and, and company culture. So to me, it has a role because what that does is it galvanizes employees who otherwise might be silent on an issue or just do water cooler talk, or maybe talk amongst their little circles on Facebook or Twitter, whatever it may be. And so it allows, leaders to be a part of the conversation, whether they want to or not. And I think that's, again, like thinking about this work more holistically and it being cross-functional and having everyone doing the work of D&I, you're immediately drawing the leader in.
Yep.
Got it.
I second that.
That's good. So, what drew you to your companies? Was it that they had an established D&I, or you saw an opportunity, or you just wanted to work in medical biosciences, or like, what was it?
You're looking at me.
I am, sorry.
So I'll
Because you're just right next to me. Let me look at.
And I'm good with eye
Maureen,
contact. So. Well, for me, I've only been in corporate for 4 months. So
What were you doing before that?
I was writing a dissertation.
I knew that. I just want everybody else to know that.
Networking, getting my feet wet, and figuring out where did I want to place myself. And what I realized is that when I was going on interviews, doing informationals, that I was really being pegged in a role that I didn't want to be in and really wouldn't work for me, which was more of an analyst role because they see Ph.D. and they're like, put her in an Excel and have her like crunch some numbers. And anyone who knows me knows that is not me. Like, that's not a best use of my talent. So interestingly, I was actually an intern at Genentech over the summer and then transitioned. So the position at Genentech was more attractive to me for a few reasons. The first, I was going to come in and I was still going to be that researcher, that subject matter expert, but was going to be collecting data that was going to influence the diversity initiatives and HR initiatives. So that was going to still allow me to get my feet wet with strategizing on a larger level. Number two, it was comfortable. It's a bunch of academics there,
That's true.
so they really like data there. So I think it's just a good segue to continue doing similar work that I was doing. And then number three, it's a large enough organization where I can like see if the things that I talk about, this cross-functional work and drawing people in from different parts of the business actually work.
Did you advocate for the role? Like, were you campaigning while you were an intern about doing this diversity
Well,
work?
I actually sit on the D&I team.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
I sit on the D&I team.
Got it. Got it. Cool.
Yeah,
Natalie,
so
Maurice.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
For me, I literally spent months trying to figure out, all right, who will hire this non-D&I guy to do this D&I stuff? I sit there, I
know.
had a salad with you telling you
I
how
know,
I think
I
I'm
know.
just going to quit and not
I
even
want
focus
barbecue,
on
though,
it.
next time.
Yeah, I'm just saying. And so it's like many of the other things that exist in this space. It's exclusive. And so if we're really talking about the problem is we perpetuate this exceptionalism that exists in tech and that exists in the space. And so what attracted me to CZI is, one, they gave me a chance because I wasn't like the traditional D&I person. It's a truly like non-traditional space, and it gives me the opportunity to do work that almost I couldn't do at any other company. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to say, hey, we're completely not not the norm. We're completely different. You aren't either. That's attractive. Let's make this work. And literally, I get to build and do things that most D&I people probably dream that they wish they could do. So I'm super blessed, and I recognize the privilege that exists in that. But I also recognize it's then my responsibility to ensure that other people get a chance to do the work that I get to do every single day without any questions asked. My people are never going to say, "Oh, that's just a bad idea," or you're wasting your time. I literally can create stuff and do it and build in a way that just most people can't. So I recognize that I'm blessed in that way.
So excited for you.
Yeah, it's pretty
great.
exciting.
Natalie?
So for me, one of the main reasons is that I get the opportunity to influence other tech companies inside of my own tech company. So Pivotal, we help other companies build amazing software, but we're essentially exporting culture, right? So people are coming
that's good.
to Pivotal to learn how to be a tech company, which immediately is ugh, that's a little scary, right? When you're thinking about the traditional tech culture. But if you have the opportunity to change that, not only internally, but for our clients, that's huge for me. And then the second thing is, more so than any other company, I feel like we really live our values, which are do the right thing, do what works, and be kind. And there's this baseline of empathy in everything that we do, and I felt that immediately coming in, which is a very good. It doesn't solve all the problems, right? But it's a good baseline to work off of.
Nice.
So it felt like a very fertile ground, so to speak, for making real change.
Awesome. Well, we only have a couple more minutes, and I know you guys have a lot more to share, right? Right, yeah, right. What are some final words you want to leave with the crowd or anybody who's thinking about getting into this work? Any words of encouragement or advice you would give maybe to your younger self of 6 months or a year ago? What would you would have wanted to know? Because you guys are all fairly new in your roles, right? 1 month, 2 months,
Yeah.
2 weeks.
I've been feeling a lot of lately you can't expect if you don't ask, right? So make more asks than you think you should make, right? I think a lot of people get very frustrated with certain segments of the business because X, Y, Z is not happening. But it's have you actually gone to their door and asked them for something?
That's a good
right?
point.
And have you done it twice, right? I think that's something that I would have told myself. I still tell myself this, but
That's good advice.
That's a big one for me.
Take that.
Be brazen, be authentic, know your truth. Understand that you're an expert just as much as the next one, even though
Just
they
as
might,
much as a Gen Xer.
basically. So, yeah, don't get caught up in X amount of years of experience and corporate this, corporate
right.
that. Because there for a moment, I did get kind of caught up in it. But then I snapped back and I realized, these are people, that's all they've done is been in corporate. So of course they're going to talk to me like that and they don't fully understand, my fit. So just understand that you're a trailblazer in the space. No one has the answer. There's no recipe for a D&I team. Like, we're figuring this out as we go.
Nice.
Yeah.
good.
If no one gives you the chance or the opportunity to like do the work, create it yourself. Especially if you live in the Bay, there is definitely enough that you can do to actually do the work. And it doesn't take a ton of money. There are a lot of people who will give you space to actually create and build things that you want. So lean on that, build from that, do the things that you know to be true in your experiences, and then make sure that when people do begin to recognize the things that you already knew, ensure that you bring somebody else along. That's literally the only way that we're going to ensure that other people get to eat the way that I get to eat at CZI or wherever tech company you are, because this is literally the way that you can move people out of poverty. So I want to make sure that people who know what it is to be hungry literally have a chance to be at the table. So that's what I want to leave with.
Awesome. I'm super excited about these D&I leaders. Aren't you guys? Let's give them a hand. Thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.